Welcome to Cozy Joe Show. Today we are going to learn how to do a rib stitch hat in knit ribbing, and we're going to use 3 strands of worsted weight yarn so that you'll have a super thick hat, and it's going to be worked on circular 16-inch circular needles. So I got my circular needles here. Let's see which one. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to use these 10 millimeter circular needles. I love working on circulars. And I like these little short needles. Okay, so that's a circular needle, and it's 16 inches from here all the way around to here. Now, why do you have this? Because we're going to make, it's going to be a tube. It's all going to be in one piece. There's not going to be a seam. And this makes, when you're knitting it, it makes it into a circle so that you don't have to slide it off of a needle and keep flipping. You just keep working in continuous rounds in your pattern stitch. So, and you use them just like regular needles. I'm going to cast on using the short tail cast on method. And this pattern is going to use 40 stitches cast on. So I'm going to do that for you, and I'm going to come back once I get all those loaded on the needles, and then I'm going to show you how to join the round. So I've cast on 40. All right, now one of the things you have to make sure of when you're working with circulars is when you go to join the round, make sure that none of the stitches are twisted, that they're all going in the same direction, going around that the needles. The little ridge is going to be all on one side, okay? And you want to make sure there's enough stitches on here that when you go to make a round, it all fits and there's no spaces. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So I've cast on 40, but I'm going to cast on one extra one so that we can join the round. Don't worry, we're going to get rid of that stitch. Okay, so I made sure everything is all going the same direction, and now I'm going to pull both sides of my stitches all the way up to the end of the needles. So you can see I have enough stitches that it's going to go all the way around. All right, I had it backwards. I was being goofy there. All right, I got to cast on one more. I can't get used to this camera angle, sorry. All right, here we go. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and I am going to knit that stitch, okay? So I'm doing a knit stitch. All right, I'm going to slip it off just like normal, and what I'm going to do to join it, I'm going to bind off the second stitch on the right needle, okay? And that just means I'm going to put my needle underneath all of it, and I'm going to pass that over. You got to pull tension on the newly knitted stitch with the yarn end, and you just bind that off over the end of that stitch. Just like that. Now you're joined. Right? It's that simple. So now you can either place a stitch marker there so you know where the beginning of the round is. I'm not going to, because I'm not worried about that so much as I am the length of this, and that's going to determine when I bind the hat off. Okay, so now, see how it's all joined in one circle, and it's going to be a big tube. And I'm going to work in knit one, purl one pattern. That's all you're going to do all the way around, knit one, purl one. And you just scoot your stitches around as you work, and then you'll get back to that same spot, and then I'll show you what you need to do when you get there. When you're working with 3 strands of yarn, always make sure that you get that needle underneath all of those strands so that you won't drop any. All right, so here's the first, here's the first knit stitch. All right, you just slide it right off the end, just like that. Here's a purl stitch. Remember, you bring the yarn between the needles to the front. Okay, now I'm doing a knit stitch, got to take it back between the needles to the back. Okay, and a knit stitch. I guess it is a good idea to go ahead and mark that round for the first row, especially if you've never done this kind of pattern before. So you'll know where to start with your knit stitch for the second round. So that's all I'm doing, just back and forth. Oop. I'm having trouble because of the way I'm having to look through my camera to do my stitches. All right, so, and you can see that your purl stitches are going to have that little horizontal bar just like normal purl stitches, okay? And I'm just going to do that all the way around, and I'll come back when I finish that round. Okay, so I've finished the first round, and one thing about working on big needles and chunky yarn, length that's growing there, each row is going to be big, so it tends to work up pretty fast. Now, I just realized something. Here's my stitch marker, my little tail of yarn where I started from. Okay, so now I'm going to start round 2, and it's same thing, knit one, purl one. You don't turn these. You don't do anything, you just keep it facing you like that and just keep working around and round and round. It's that easy. So I'm going to work another round and knit one, purl one, and I'll come back. So I have completed round 3, and I'm just going to keep going in rounds until this is, let's just say 11 inches long, the length. And that's all you do. Just knit, purl, just keep going round and round and round. And when I'll come back when I get about 5 inches of length so you can see it. So there is the hat after about 5 inches. You can see the ribbing texture there, and it's gotten really stretchy. Okay, I have knit in the rib stitch. Look at that pretty pattern. It's springy. Stretchy. So that's about 10.5 inches. Now comes the fun part. Yay! Okay. Now, we have to work a decrease row. All right? So I have just enough stitches on these circular needles to make a round. So when I decrease, I'm not going to have enough stitches to continue on circular needles. What do you do? This is what you do right here. This is the fun part. So you get out your double pointed needle sets, 5 needle set, and let's see, I'm using a 10, what's that? All right, there we go, there's my size 10. Oh my gosh, that's too many needles. No, it's fun. It's so much fun. All right, now, the goal is, all right, there's 5 needles. 1 is going to be your working needle. Put that to the side. So you have 4 needles. And what's going to happen is you kind of work it, you're going to place your needles to where they're kind of like this. And you're going to, as you decrease, you're going to fill these up. You have to split the stitches on here to equal, you want to split it equally amongst the 4 needles, okay? And then you'll just be knitting and purling with your active needle, okay? It sounds difficult, but it's really not that hard. It's really fun too. All right, so we're going to do this together. Okay, so we're going to decrease in pattern. So we're going to keep going with the knit one, purl one. But we're going to have to keep in mind, so the first stitch is going to be a knit stitch. So what we have here on the needle, we have knit purl. Don't worry about that, the pattern that's on here right now. We're going to knit these 2 together as 1 stitch to decrease. And then the next one, the next 2 are going to be a purl stitch. See how that's working? So we're going to stay with the knit, purl all the way around we're just doing 2 stitches at a time off of this needle to decrease. All right, so here we go. Make sure you have the same size. Turn it around. Where'd it go? All right, now I just saw it. Where'd it go? There it is. 10 millimeter, just like what we were using on our circulars. Okay, now let me see if I can do this through the camera. This is hard. Oh. All right. So if you want to, you can put a stitch saver on this other needle over here if you want. I'm not going to. And you can even use that on these until you get used to using them. All right, so I'm going to knit on the new needle, and when you do that, you're going to have to make sure that you pull it up good and tight so there won't be a space between these 2 stitches here. That's real easy to do. All right, so let's see. All right, there's one. And pull it up. See how that does right there? Hang on. All right, and then the next one, we're going to bring the yarn to the front of the working needle. Okay. And we're going to purl the next 2 to decrease. Just like that. Pull it up. Tight there. And you can go as slow as you need to. Nobody's timing you. Right there. So now pull them up. Otherwise it's going to look kind of weird if you don't keep tightening them up. All right, I'm going to put about, I don't know, 5 stitches on here. And then I'm going to move to the next needle. All right. So I'm going to go back to the back to do my next knit stitch. Find the next 2 stitches on the left needle. And just knit both of them together to decrease. See? It's easy peasy. It looks and sounds more complicated than it really is. You're just doing the same thing. You're just working on a different needle. All right, how many we got? Pull it up. There's 4. Let's do 1 more. That's going to be a knit stitch. And if you forget and get off pattern, that's no big deal. You can keep up with it, keep your little notepad and write knit, purl if you want to. But in the end, it's really not going to make a big deal of a difference. All right, so let's do 1 more stitch. Wait a minute, let's see. Yeah. So that's going to be a purl. All right. So the next is going to be a knit stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back there so I won't forget. I'm going to leave that number on there. Now we get another needle. All right. And you always want to keep the needle you're working with kind of on the top. Okay, it's going to be awkward feeling with all these needles hanging around. But I love doing it. All right, so next one is going to be a knit stitch. Now, when you're going between the double pointed needles, it's critical that you pull that yarn up real tight. Otherwise, there's going to be a gap in your stitches. It takes practice. It's a skill you have to learn in your knitting. But once you master it, I love working on all these double pointed needles because I hate seams. And if I can do something without having a seam, like make a tube, then I'm going to do it because I just can't stitch it together with a yarn needle. The seam won't hold. Okay, here we go. The next one's a purl stitch. All right, next with a knit stitch. Now, if you don't want to go this fancy, you could probably just, instead of doing all this, just cut a long string of yarn and weave it through all of your little stitches and just pull it up in a knot and do it that way if you want to. You know, but I like doing this because it just comes off nice and clean. All right, so you kind of see what I'm doing. I'm gonna keep going and load it up onto all of these needles, and then we'll work around and I'll show you how that works. So that's what it looks so far. I have it on 2 needles, and I'm still in the process of decreasing and loading onto these. I'm just gonna keep going around and I'll show you what that looks like when it's all loaded up. Okay. So I have decreased and loaded up all of my 5-point needle set. It's not on the circulars anymore. And we're going to work around with this together. It's going to do knit 1, purl 1 in our pattern. Let's see. Okay, now what usually happens, it usually doesn't stay in this nice pretty little square. They usually fold in together like that, and you could put point protectors on there if you're worried about your stitches falling off, but if you have them scooched up there into the middle, it's usually going to be okay. So that's kind of how I work, just kind of keep it scooched up like that. And let's see here, we'll have a knit stitch. All right, so I'm going to go in there. Oh, that looks aggravating. It's really not. It's really fun. All right, so I'm going to knit, pull it through, and it's going to be loaded onto the working needle. Pull this up tight because it's going to be a problem if you don't do that between your needles. Okay, now bring it to the front to do a purl stitch. Just a regular purl stitch. All right, pull it up and then go to the back for a knit stitch. And you can put a marker at the beginning so you'll know which one's the beginning stitch. And then another purl. It's just a matter of remembering your pattern, basically. Then a knit. And a purl. You want to try to get it even about how many stitches are on these needles. It don't really matter, but you don't want it so spread out. All right, so there's that. So there's the first needle completed. All right, I'm gonna put a point protector on there to mark my spot so I'll know that's the first one. All right, now let's see. Going to the second needle. And you don't even have to use 4, you can use 3 if you want to. It's the same thing. All right, so knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. We're gonna knit. Now because I'm going between needles, you want to make sure you keep your yarn good and pulled up tight so there's no gap there. There's one. Pull it tight, okay? Come to the front, we're going to purl. Back to knit. front to purl. Back to knit. You just have to be patient because your thread's going to hang up on everything. Back to the front to purl. Knitting keeps your mind engaged. And if you really want to get your mind off of something, grab your 5-pointed needle set. Alright, so I'm just going to continue around just like that, and then I'll come back. Now I'm going to continue working around on this for until it's about 1 inch past the decrease, and you'll be able to see it down here. So basically once you start the decrease, do about 4 rows and that'll get you, okay? And then we'll come back and I'll show you what we will do to bind it off. Alright, so I have finished with the 5 needles. Now why do I do it that way? Well, I want the top to kind of curve over the top of the head, but you don't want to go too crazy with that because it'll look awkward. So here's what we're going to do next. We're not going to bind it off at all. We're going to, let's see, get you a good long length of yarn. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a crochet hook and we're just going to pull that yarn end through these stitches. Alright, so let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go under this knit stitch with the crochet hook as to knit. I'm going to grab hold of that yarn end with the hook, just pull it through. I'm going to pull it all the way through that stitch and slide the stitch off the end of the needle. Alright, so it's secured with the yarn that I just pulled through there. Alright, so we can keep going. And what we're going to do at the end is just pull it up real tight and secure it. And that will be how we finish it. Did I get all of them? No, I missed one. And be careful, don't do what I just did and not catch all 3 strands. Okay, there we go. Same thing, just pull it all the way through. I'm just threading it through there. So I guess an alternative way to bind off. It only works if you're going to bunch things up. Easy peasy. So I'm just threading it through all these stitches like a shoelace. Alright, so I'm going to do that all the way around, then I'll come back. Okay, so I've pulled the length of string through all of my stitches, and now all you're going to do is just pull it up real tight, like that, and you're just going to secure it and fasten it off. And that makes the top of your hat. Easy peasy. I wanted to show how to weave in the ends. I had turned this inside out so that I could weave in the yarn ends on the opposite side. I don't think I've ever really shown how to do it up close, so I'm going to do that. So you just find some stitches like that and you just pull the tail through. You're hiding it underneath these stitches. It's real easy to do, and you can see how I'm doing it right there, in case you ever wondered. It's really easy, but it's not my favorite part. But it just takes a little bit of time, and then you can't even see it where it's been woven through. And that's how you weave in the ends. So there is the finished hat, and I put a pom-pom on the top. I have a separate video on how to make those.